Welcome to Puerto Rico, Chris.
Thanks for having me.
It's good to see you down here.
Yeah, it's my first time here.
First time in Puerto Rico. I've seen you at a lot of Seth's conferences over the years, and of course, I know what GorillaDesk is, but I don't really know the deep background of GorillaDesk. So I want to start with, how the heck did you get into software?
Yeah, it's probably not, it's been a long road, we'll say. My dad started his pest control company in 1986.
Okay.
I was only 5 years old. So I've been around it my whole life. It's basically riding with him in a truck since I was 6. Mm-hmm. And I got into the business as a teenager, feeling strongly that I would never get into it. That he always wanted me to become a great guitarist or a doctor.
Okay.
So that's what my family was.
I mean, that's usually the choice, right?
Yeah.
I want my kid to be a guitarist or doctor.
So went off to college, came back, worked for Business Wire for a year as a press release earnings editor.
Yep.
And saved all my money knowing at that moment I'm basically unemployable. I dreaded working for someone else every day. So I saved all my money to start what would be my first e-commerce store online.
Okay.
So that's what got me into development. I ended up getting into the promotional and products industry, and I got really linked into the gymnastics niche.
Okay.
And then I built an online e-commerce store from scratch using, developer assets. And luckily I have a good design sense. So I think that's where my strength comes in. I'm much more of a creative, I'm a musician.
So you're not a coder?
Not a coder.
Can you code now or no?
No. I understand basic languages and what they're utilized for, and how to leverage new technology and what it's utilized for, but I don't get into coding. And I'm actually really glad that I never, because a lot of people can get stuck into that mode instead of being creative with the business, which I've been able to do.
So what year did you found GorillaDesk?
I founded GorillaDesk in 2010.
Okay.
And 2013 is when I actually took it to market. So I got my, registered it in 2010, but really didn't start selling and bringing on our first clients until 2013.
Okay.
So for 7 years, I managed my family's company and built GorillaDesk during that time, and then went full-time at it in 2013, and also left my family's pest control company to my younger brother that he's managed as well and kept going all this time.
Did you build GorillaDesk specifically for single-purpose use in the family business, or did you start it with the idea that you were going to commercialize it at some point?
100% I was going to commercialize it, right? So I went from doing e-commerce at a young, just out of college, to then finding out that I don't want to be the middleman.
Okay.
Right? So what can I get into that I can control this process, and what's the most advantageous vehicle, which would be subscription billing models. So when I was looking at software, SaaS fit the subscription billing model. I knew exactly that I wanted to be in that model. So then I thought, okay, what would be the best software to build that I would know intuitively and be able to intentionally build something? It'd be for the family business.
How did you're not a coder. I mean, you've got an eye for design, but I think you and I are probably similar in that way. Like, I don't know anything about code. How did you start that process? Like, what, you're like, okay, I got an idea. I'm going to do this software, and it's going to schedule shit for pest control and all this sort of jazz. Like, did you go out and hire coders and say, I've got this idea? Like, what did you do?
So I had a friend, Jeremy Pound, and he owned a development shop in East Boca Raton.
Okay.
And I got to be around him and how he worked and who he had at his disposal. He had a full development team in East Boca. So I learned from him. I said, hey, I'd like to understand, what's the process from start to finish that you're doing in developing these applications? Yeah. And he walked me through it all. And it all started with wireframing, with the design, with the concept. And when I saw that that's the way it started, I'm like, I can completely do that. Right? So then I spent all my energy creating the first wireframes of what GorillaDesk would be. Mm-hmm. And then the next thing is the biggest challenge is finding development.
Okay.
It took me about 3 tries to find a strong enough development partner who could actually deliver.
Let's talk about the first 2 tries. How did that work out? Like, what did you experience?
Sure. I mean, it's still, there's a site called Upwork, pretty popular, and a number of other sites, but Upwork seemed to be where I found the first few two resources.
Okay.
Both of them domestic here in the US. And they were taking on my project as project work. Hey, I need to get to this milestone. Here's what I'm trying to build, which was generally the combination of scheduling, invoicing, and routing. There's that trifecta that people are looking for.
Yep.
And you got many of other applications that are great in scheduling or route or invoicing or those combinations, but then they're not bringing in routing, which is what we need for profitability.
Yep.
Right. So I just got them on that path, and he was able to deliver on scheduling and invoicing, but then, you know, he ended up with life to deal with and couldn't stay on my project. And I only had him for about 6 months.
Okay.
And then I learned that everything he developed was basically unusable, right?
And I guess that might be the problem. If you don't really know code, it's hard to tell and hard to assess.
So I became a little smarter. This was about 6 months, a little bit smarter. Instead, I got the next developer, and I had Jeremy vouch all the code. So finding someone that can help you vouch the code if you're not technical, that's going to help a lot.
Okay.
So the next person I got was vouched for, and I had him for about a year, and he was able to really get me to like the beta, like an alpha beta version.
Okay.
But then again, you know, they couldn't put enough time behind the project to actually for us to get traction. So I knew from that moment, I can't just have a single developer.
Got it.
I needed to start to think about having a whole team.
Yeah.
So then again, I went on this search online, and I ended up finding a partner in Vietnam. And this partner in particular, he had 60 people on his development team, and they started to take over my project, and they were doing a phenomenal job, like ridiculous difference. And then I knew, okay, I've got to figure out how can I provision this team. Over the year or so that I was working with them, being amazing partners, I became very close to the owner, you know, who's Lee, who's my partner now. And I went to him and I said, hey, how are things going? You know, how are you doing? Basically, as we built such a relationship that he told me, we're taking tons of projects. I'm always having to sell new work. And I would love to just be focused on one product. And I learned that a lot of developers want and desire that.
Yeah.
They don't want to be working on many different things and then not seeing the outcome of their hard effort. A lot of developers just want to see that what they're building is being utilized and used.
Yeah.
And when they jump from project to project to project, they never get that satisfaction. And they're always feeling rushed, under the gun. They're having to do a lot of sales to get new business, and that's not their strength.
Yeah.
So I learned that, and naturally I came to Lee and I said, Lee, look, let's keep the best developers, and we'll just partner together and we'll work on GorillaDesk. And so we've been doing that now for the last 13 years together.
Oh, wow. Okay.
You know, so, and I just met them all for the first time in Vietnam.
I remember when you told me about this at Power or Energy or whatever, I was surprised that you had been working together with these guys so long and you're finally just getting over there.
Yeah. I mean,
so
it was amazing to see
So
them.
let's talk about that. You and Rebecca took the trip over to Vietnam, first time in Vietnam, first time meeting these guys in person. You'd worked with them for over a decade. What was Vietnam like?
Vietnam is definitely a big culture difference. You know, I wasn't expecting people don't really like your personal space isn't your own. You know, people just kind of move through you, and everybody's kind of in a rush. Is really populated, and they have motorbikes all over the road, right? So that's different, and there's no code enforcement, so all the building is just completely random. I mean, just seeing it is a really good experience.
What cities were you guys in?
We were in Ho Chi Minh and then Dalat. So Ho Chi Minh is a city that you look out for as far as you can see to the horizon line in the city for as far as you can see. In Dalat, they call it the city of flowers. So as far as you can see, our greenhouses lit up at night with rows of lights in them, really pretty. So, and everything is very agriculture based. People grow there, like, which is also something really cool to experience. Like what you're eating is not too far
Came out of the
away
ground
from
yesterday, yeah.
Exactly. And I really like that. I like the fact that things are natural, holistic, and where you can see like the sources where
Yeah.
everything's coming from.
What'd you think about the food in general?
The food's a little tough for me because I'm like basically a strict red meat eater.
Yeah.
And just in the way they prepare it, I think they do a lot of boiling of the meat. So, but the pho and the breakfasts I loved and were amazing. I would just say I did lose weight.
Yeah.
Maybe if I was there, I would, you know, get used to a bit more, eat a bit more. But I'm also generally kind of a picky eater in the way that I focus on red meat mainly.
So this was like the first time, I guess, you experienced rice and all sorts of chicken and things for breakfast, right?
Yeah. Yeah. It's the way that they, you know, the pho and the bowls is a combination of things.
Yeah.
And I mean, to be honest with you, I'm much more of I like my stuff separated.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I did enjoy some of the bowls, the pho, as long as it's chicken steak and not, you know, kind of simple. I'm more of a simple guy when it comes to eating.
What did you like best about Vietnam?
I like the landscape. You know, we saw a place called the Florist. As far as you can see, flowers of every type, bamboo forest. I know we really enjoy, me and my wife, walking through nature and just seeing different landscapes. Saw many different types of waterfalls. Even just in Ho Chi Minh, you know, seeing the landscape of it, that how wide and vast the city is. Seeing that it's not really a coastal city, but they rely and love the river there. You know, everybody wants to live on the river.
Yeah.
The next thing, to round that out, what I enjoyed was being with everyone. You know,
How many people were you guys with on that trip?
there's about, well, we had two evenings with the team itself, which was about 40 of us.
Okay.
So we did a dinner one night and then a karaoke night, and just the building the energy, the culture. I was able to spend a whole day with them and basically just focused on culture only. Went over core values, reinforced core values. That was one of the big reasons why I was there. As well as instilling energy for this next big push that we're working on as well for the software. So yeah, the landscape and interacting with the team, those are my favorite.
If I remember correctly, GorillaDesk is pretty distributed. You guys are around the globe. You've got folks in the US, you've got folks in Asia.
Yeah, so we've got teams in Vietnam, Serbia, Cyprus, UK, as well as in the US and the Philippines.
Okay.
So, you know, I found really strong teams on the support side. There's a level of empathy in the Philippines that I just don't think you can find other places.
Yeah.
And we're known for our support because of the culture of the people there, and how much they care about the work that they're doing,
Yep.
as well as the clients. You know, the number one thing, if you ask anyone there, what they enjoy most is getting a good feedback or a compliment from the client. Like, that's the ultimate for them. So it makes sense to build that type of team there. When the UK, there are a lot of really creative resources there. So I have all UI, UX design, brand development, all out of the UK. In Serbia and Cyprus, you have amazing back-end development resources. You know, I've learned over time doing this so long, they're like specific groups where you can get what you need at the highest level. You know, in Serbia and Cyprus, I found back-end developers.
Yep.
Vietnam, you have full stack, mobile, desktop. Philippines, you know,
Customer
all
service.
the call centers there, they're all looking for their next possible career change, and they want to be working for us in the States, you
Yep.
know. And then in the US, it's basically all senior leads, you know, senior content, senior marketing, senior success, all sales, and then there's also a senior support team. So, you know, we're all distributed. There's about 6 of us in South Florida, a couple of us in California, New Jersey, North Carolina, kind of distributed out.
And what sort of end user uses GorillaDesk? What's the typical profile of the business that would choose to use GorillaDesk?
Yeah, I'd say a few years ago, it'd be definitely SMB was where we have our flag in the ground. Guys about, on average, 4 trucks on the road. You know, we bring them on because that's the feature set that we have. Over the last, I'd say, 3 years, we've gone into mid-market, mainly because now we have integrated voice over IP, integrated sales pipeline management, opportunity management, you know, things that mid-market are really looking for. So
Okay.
GorillaDesk is now trying to and we're establishing now our flag as far as it goes in mid-market. We have many companies I brought on board that are around 90 employees, and we're really listening to them intently. They're all our VIPs, and they actually work with us to figure out and develop everything that they are needing for mid-market right now.
What are some distinctions between GorillaDesk and other software applications that are focused on route-based service businesses?
Distinction is, one is ease of use. And I know everybody claims it, so it's a tough one. Everybody says it. But then when you're actually in there and you use it, and the clients say it, so the top 3 things clients say about us is ease of use, support of the software, and then knowing that we come from the industry. And they can tell and feel that. Right? Somebody uses the app, man, I know, it feels like this guy was working.
Actually knows what we do.
Exactly.
Right.
So I'd say those are the 3 things that we're known for: easy use, support success teams, Rockstar, A+, and then, knowing we're developing coming from the industry. And even now, even though I'm not specifically in the field, all the feedback, there's so much feedback now, Paul, comes from everybody that I don't really need to be there. They're all there for me, and we're listening to them intently. And I think that that's another big thing, is that every single request that comes in, I look at it. So I sit down with the product team weekly, and we look at every feature request. And then we sit down quarterly, and we plan the whole roadmap and scope based on essentially taking and distilling down everybody's feedback. And we really work hard at that. So I think that, and that shows, because people will say, man, you just came out with that. That's exactly what I was looking for. People think, we're coming out with things exactly they're looking for because we're really distilling down all the data and getting it down to what they want.
Yeah. What's it like so you never worked for a software company, so you've had to learn everything on your own. How does a guy like you, how do you continue to educate yourself on the technology, building out these roadmaps, managing developers, which I would imagine is not an easy task in and of itself. How do you do that?
I read a book a day for a long time.
Okay.
I read. I study everything. I can sit down with an unrelenting focus and just try to absorb everything I can, and then it's calling on who you can. And that's been a big resource for me. So right now I've always always had a coach.
Okay.
And I find people who coach within SaaS who've done it, what I've done, want to be doing, and they've done it before. So, right now I'm also part of a SaaS Academy. Dan Martell runs a SaaS Academy specifically for SaaS companies. And there's so many heavy hitting guys in there. Just being able to reach them whenever I want on a certain subject or topic that I might be dealing with, that as well becomes invaluable. So I was also part of EO, which is Entrepreneurs Organization, for many years. And they teach Vern Harnish's scaling up. So I also started to learn, I need to learn and understand business frameworks. So once you learn scaling up, then you get into Gino Wickman's traction and so on. So if you expose yourself to those groups, you have all the knowledge. Is up to you to go in there and, get connected with the right people, ask them the right questions, and then figure out what resources led them down the path that they are at now. And so I ask always for book recommendations, and I'm always voraciously reading. Yeah.
Well, then we're going to ask you, what's some book recommendations? What are some of the more impactful books you've read over the years?
It's tough because it really depends on where you're at a little bit on your stage. If you're just starting, then you want books like, E-Myth, things that will drive your work ethic. If you have any problem with work ethic, then you need to just align yourself to why you're doing what you're doing. So, book Why is another good one to start off with. When you're moving along, then you start to look in profit first. If you're looking for profitability out of the company versus, I'm a bootstrapped company with no investment. So everything for me is about how do I also have a lifestyle at the same time. So profit first is a good one for guys that do need to have something to sustain them. And then I would sit here and call all the heavy hitters, but what do I go to? I would say, what do I go back to the most? And I'd say it's probably the book Good to Great. What is it that really is required to make a great company? Because you can be sitting in good for a very long time and be blinded to what's is required to make you great. The 4 dysfunctions of a team, I would say, is also It really helped me understand communication. There's a lot of them.
Yeah. So you've clearly spent a lot of time educating yourself. You're reading. I love the fact that you're joining these various different affinity groups to actually put yourself in position to make phone calls to, if you need to figure something out. We're here in early 2024. What's your personal professional goals kind of going forward? How will you continue to educate yourself?
So talking about professional goals, the big BHAG starting GorillaDesk was 50,000 companies across the globe saying, I love GorillaDesk.
Okay.
We just passed 4,000.
Okay.
To attain that goal, I need to onboard 200 clients per week.
Sounds like a lot of clients.
Right now, we're on average 50 clients.
Okay.
And so it's reverse engineering what needs to change about the organization to be able to close 200 clients per week. That's the complete focus right now.
And you're doing this in pest control, but you guys are also in other industries as well, right?
We are in many other industries, mostly by referral. All of our direct marketing and marketing initiatives are all for pests. Mm-hmm. We still want to keep the flag in pest. We want to move strongly into mid-market in the pest. Mm-hmm. But we also can't hit the BHAG without moving into other industries. So lawn, all the green industries become a natural next step. Mm-hmm. And there are many hybrids already because many pest companies become hybrids due to their seasonality or other things that they might be into. Yep. And then we get recommendations from all those companies that are on board now for other real random industries that we're not even touching because they understand the core feature set can really serve any field service company. So there are many field service company software available. Mm-hmm. And so you do have to be careful a little bit about moving cross-vertical and upmarket without leaving your core audience behind, which is something we're very intentional about not doing.
So there's obviously a lot of interplay between pest and lawn. It's quite frankly the same business in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
But then as you start to get outside of pest and lawn, you get the other resi services businesses, but a lot of those things change because you have inventory management on HVAC, whereas you wouldn't necessarily have it in pest. What sort of businesses do you guys deal with today?
So it is pest. I mean, that's the top two. Pest, lawn, then cleaning is interesting next. Yep. You know why cleaning? Because cleaning does crew management similar to lawn in some cases with lawn companies. Yeah. So it's a natural next step. There's only about 32 to 36,000. I think the real number might be somewhere around there for registered pest control companies in the US. 36,000. Yeah. Right? Lawn, 650,000. Cleaning, 850,000. The problem with GorillaDesk is we're playing as a large contender in the smallest field service niche possible. Yeah. And so it does have to grow out of that.
And it seems like pest control is far more crowded from, a software provider perspective than the other industries, right? I mean, I know commercial, cleaning has a couple of different software companies that focus on it, but it's not like pest. I feel like in pest, there's a dozen, 20? I don't know. There's a lot.
I still think there's only like a top 5. Yeah. GorillaDesk is in top 3. Yeah. When I'm looking at pests, I actually see it pretty small of who is actually a strong enough player. And I actually see more competition in the other industries.
Really? Okay, yes. Interesting. Why is that?
Well, there are many people because of the compliance.
I see.
Right? So when you're meeting auditing compliance requirement, that's the biggest reason why people are choosing GorillaDesk or pest control specific applications over these other ones is that we're making sure they're hitting auditing compliance, right? Mm-hmm. So if the other CRMs don't take that as seriously as we do, we know that we'll always be chosen in this niche because that is the number one reason why you need it, right? So the other industries don't have that level of compliance. Lawn does if you're doing certain FERT jobs or chem jobs too, but not necessarily.
Got it.
So there's this whole other component, which is your auditing material requirement that other CRMs don't have to include. And so there just can be many more of them that don't have that component.
At what point were you guys, I mean, you're doing zero marketing to any of these other industry verticals. You guys are focused on pest. your clients in those other industries are coming by referral. People are like, oh, this is great. You got to use it. Somebody else gets on it. At what point will you start to shift some of your focus onto some of these other verticals?
Yeah, it's starting.
Okay.
You know, we have budget towards experimentation. Close rate on pests is way higher than any other industry, mainly because of the brand. People know us. So there does have to be a lot of concerted effort to move into these other communities. And software is very community driven now with online social, right? You can have an influencer come out that does great influencing the lawn community, and then they come out and they do a white label of another product and start selling that. That's what we're seeing now. So you're gonna have lots of smaller micro communities that are gonna be taking part of the software game, but they're still gonna only have and gain trust through the largest brands. Brands develop brand because people know, like, and trust them, but also because of what the brand is associated with. And so you have to start to build great brand associations for these other communities and other industries for them to really consider you.
What would you say is an important thing if I own whether it's a pest control company or a lawn company, and any of these resi services businesses, and I'm attempting to assess a software provider for my own company, knowing what you know, how would you go about doing that? Like, what advice would you give me? Like, Paul, here's what you really need to think about.
There's a little bias in what I'm going to say.
I
You guys
expected
can
you to
all
be.
sniff that out.
Yeah,
Everybody's human, and they'll be able to sniff out my bias. But first, it comes down to, was that software recently sold? Okay, because whenever you have an acquisition, there are a few things that happen, right? The investment for that acquisition, what they're usually going to do is they're going to look at pricing, bundled pricing, and raise pricing, and really focus on squeezing the towel on what they can get there. It starts day one. You know, even as a private company, they would say the very first thing you're going to end up doing is looking at the pricing. So when you're acquired, pricing goes up, and then you'll steadily see price increases. And then when they're acquired again, which is a pretty tough sign or signal to look at, you're going to know that that's going to be happening again. So outside of that happening on the investment side, what else happens? They go harder on the sales team, and they start to pull back on production development. And a lot of times they'll sunset the product. So one of the very first things
we saw that in ServSuite, for example.
And so there are quite a few cases that I see that. Product slows down, sunsets, and at a time where we have to be more aggressive than we ever had been before adopting new technology, Paul. You have customers that are now asking me, hey, when is AGI gonna be coming, right? And so if you end up with all these products that are purchased and sunset or sitting, you know, EverCommerce is another company that does this. They acquire and they just keep the product. They want to keep the subscriptions coming, but they don't continue to push products.
Okay.
So the next biggest thing is looking at, are they actually pushing development? Look at the past roadmap, recent roadmap, and also see if you can figure out what they're doing to keep pushing.
I never really thought about, you know, investment and development and trying to size up a software company by actually what they're doing on the development side. Because, you know, to your point, I have seen it, at least on the pest control side. You know, you saw PestPack, which now is WorkWave, but PestPack had been traded by different private equity firms over the last decade or so to the most recent acquisition. I saw ServSuite, which had been developed for many years, and then that disappeared and became, I think, part of ServiceTitan. And then all of a sudden, I hear a lot of bitching and moaning from people who are saying, like, I'm using ServSuite, and they said they're going to quit development on it. Now I got to go to another thing, or it's going to be part of pest routes or field routes, or the names are changing. So there is a lot of that going on. And how do you, to your point on development, how can I, as a business owner, understand if a company's really allocating resources to development? You talked about looking at, like, the milestones and development maps or so on and so forth. But if I'm a layperson, like, how can I figure that out? Like, how would I figure that out from GorillaDesk? Like, I want to do some investigation on you guys today. How would I figure that out?
Yeah, I'd probably just try to find users, you know, with that have multiple year experience, and ask, you know, are they releasing new features? And how are the releases going? Do they seem to be aggressive in the way that they want to advance the product? Basically talking to users that are using it.
Okay.
And what you want to sift through is, releases are tough. They're always going to come with some type of issue, but how quickly do they fix them? How prompt is the support after the fact? What I pride with in GorillaDesk is most all issues are resolved within the same day.
Gotcha.
And all communication is handled. You reach our chat team, it's within 3 minutes. You reach our support team, it's always called back the same day. Part of integrity as a core value. So what is the current experience that users having? What are they seeing as far as the amount of developing that's happening? And be a little bit careful about, yes, there will be issues that they talk about, but have them bring out the positive. Because it's a lot easier for people to look at what's negative, and you really need to kind of pull out sometimes what's positive, just because that's people's natural state.
What's your biggest frustration with business today, with GorillaDesk? Like when you look at it, what's the one thing that you really want to change and you've struggled with? And that might be an unfair question. I have those in my own business. We all do.
Yeah. As a CEO, you get the shit sandwich, let's say. You know every issue. And so I want every issue to be solved. When you ask me that question, I'm like, man, everything.
Yeah.
Everything. That's what I'm working on, everything, actively every day. But when you say, the biggest issue, it's just star players, man. I need to get a lot more star players. That's all I focus on. And getting the people who aren't star players out and getting the ones that are in. I think that's the number one thing that I put all my focus and time on, and the problem that I try to solve. Who? It always comes down to who do I really need to get what it is done at the highest level.
You've got a lot of colleagues overseas, and I think when people hear that, particularly in the United States, they start to think like, oh, this is a labor arbitrage game. You're just trying to get cheaper overseas labor. But we've used folks all around the world. I mean, I got people in 5 countries, and we've done this for 15 years. And it really, in my mind, is not a labor wage saving expedition as much as it's finding people who are freaking awesome at what they do. And I don't care where they are. If I find somebody who's out there willing to kill it, I want to keep that person. It doesn't matter to me. And I can see, with the businesses that we work with, you have those kind of 2 thought processes. Some companies just want to get the cheapest people. They'll go overseas, they'll get people that are super cheap. But it sounds like you've really gotten some awesome folks and have done everything you can to keep them, irrespective of where they are.
Yeah. Everyone, there's not a company out there not using resources that are distributed.
Yeah.
It's just how it is. So find the best ones and where they are.
Yeah.
I love my team. They are strong, and I only keep strong players. And I'm constantly removing weak players.
How big is your total team now?
Total team is 52,
Okay.
and it should be 58 to 62 within like a month or so. Yeah.
I mean, in order to be onboarding 200 new clients a week, when do you think you get to that point? What's your goal? What's your hope?
I mean, yeah, the goal is to get to 200 accounts closed and have a month where we've experienced that with 4 consecutive weeks. That would be 800 clients within 1 month. Right now I'm closing about 50 on average per week, 200 clients per month. So it's not just necessarily adding more seats to what we're doing, it's retooling. So when we bring people on, there are a few things we have to deal with: importing, exporting from their current application, then importing.
Yeah.
And then they bring in custom documentation into the application that we help and build for them at no additional charge. Build out whatever contracts, agreements that are unique to them, we bring into the application. And then training, right? So I got those 3 components. I can turn up marketing and sales and bring them in the door, but everything else on the back end has to be there first.
Yeah.
So I just went from last year, on average, we were closing 20, Paul.
Yep.
And in 1 year, I got us to 50. And I learned what was required there. And I have now, with the whole team, have a more clear understanding that we've hit 50 in a few consecutive months, that Well, now we know what we need to do at 200. And that comes down to really building back-end systems and processes that are going to enable the current team members to do more of what they're doing without just having more heads on board. So building importing tools that help automate that process for us in the back end, building documentation tools that help as well make that process more seamless with us. Seeing in the training that we're doing after the fact and onboarding, what a lot of people self-serve, and a lot of people are becoming more self-serve oriented. 70% of the people that come in and close with us are just closing on their own because we're giving them all the resources that they need to learn. So again, it's just making that as well more robust. All the tools have to be leveled up before you do a whole push to change the dynamic of your company, and it's onboarding that many companies at one time. Right? I'm sure you experience the same thing because
we do.
You've gone against it as well. You have to, at every next large phase or incremental push, a retooling should be done, or you're just going to send customers out the back end unhappy.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like the door-to-door business that cranks up the door-to-door sales and doesn't have the field service ability to service it. It's the worst thing you could do. You're better off not taking those clients on to begin with. As you talk about this, like, what sort of companies do you turn away just because it's not, you yourself know it's not the right fit? Like, somebody might have a cleaning business, you're like, yeah, we can handle that. But I mean, I would imagine you get calls from all sorts of random companies that think that would make sense for them, but probably won't.
A lot of people come in with a list of desires, and we're either showing them that we're exactly matching and hit the mark with complete transparency, or we're telling them what things that they desire are upcoming and will be delivered. And we tell people what we're not going to be doing and what is not in the application with complete transparency. And then we allow them to make their decision based on that. So people, we help people self-assess themselves for not being a fit. Yeah. And there are quite a bit, because we also have many other verticals coming through the door that we're sending away. So, a lot of people, they want to make sure that there are certain things that the product is going to have, and we're just bringing clarity to that as far as what GorillaDesk is delivering.
Yeah, I would imagine you've got a lot of stuff on the roadmap 6, 12, 18 months from now that people want today that you're just not, you're not going to be able to get to it.
Exactly. But a lot of them are also saying, hey, we know that this might not be there today, but is it in the plan? And so we, again, tell them transparently if it is, or, and when it may be, and we're willing to share that. We don't ever publicly share our roadmap, but as we're doing our individual sales, we are sharing with everybody individually what's happening.
At what point do you like to form the relationship with the potential client? Do you like to get involved when it's like a one-man operation, or do you like to get involved when it's of a certain size?
One-man operations, though, it's interesting you say that, because, like more than almost 80% of the service industry is a solo operator. Yeah. So we segment them and deal with them differently. They go to a certain sales and support team for them individually that really serves them well. When I get involved is usually when it's any new industry that we're trying to move into, or that it's a client that's asking for a feature set as well that we're trying to move into. Because what I do, I jump on the call and I get immediate clarity that their expectation of what we're trying to do and what they believe that they want is completely aligned. So there's calls, I'd say half of my day every day is interacting with new potential clients and or what we mark as our VIP clients. Okay. And these are clients where we're trying to discover, not really discover, but affirm, and that we're aligned in where we're moving with these features. The product team, and Catherine, who's my right hand, she holds a lot of those conversations on my behalf as well, and we aggregate our conversations together. So like half of my day is basically spent still interacting and listening at the front line, what's happening.
How active are you in HR hiring decisions?
Really active. I'd say I'm still at the size where I can be in there on every decision. I prefer it that way. And I also like to really clearly define the culture for those new individuals coming on board. because there's a certain amount of drive that all the talent in GorillaDesk have. That's kind of whatever it takes mentality. You know, we really work the overtime required. There's a lot that happens after hours. And I like to be involved to get complete alignment, because I notice if I don't get complete alignment, they'll come in the GorillaDesk and the teams themselves will opt those people out. And then it doesn't become a conversation of, it's more of a conversation of, I'm sorry, but you're not meeting the team's expectation of what it takes to, you know, basically be at GorillaDesk.
How do you define the culture of GorillaDesk?
Well, culture is defined by TIGER, which is an acronym we created to make it really easy for people to understand: Tinker, Integrity, Growth, Empathy, and Remarkable. And basically every level 10 meeting that we have, we hit on core values by letting our team members have core value shout outs at the very beginning of the call. So, hey, what's going well, and do you have any core value shout outs for your team? So that's one way to bring it up in every single
What would be a
meeting.
core value shout out?
You know, hey, I'm shouting out Paul for remarkable this week because a client actually positively remarked about him, right? I was on a call where they said the service that they received from Paul was awesome. Remarkable means to be positively remarked about. So it's an easy core value for people to bring out.
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Paul.
Yeah.
What do you think these guys who could have great companies, what's holding them back?
You know, I think, and this is just something I've thought about over the years, I think that there are some people out there that are naturally great communicators, naturally have the knack for managing people, but I don't think that's prolific. I think that's a learned skill. I think all of this stuff we do as entrepreneurs is just a series of a million experiments that you learn from. I think one of the biggest things that holds people back is just not focusing on learning yourself and educating yourself. I mean, there's just so much, like, I try to be as you know, just like you're in all these different organizations. I'm really active in YPO, and I love it because a ton of people in there are far more successful than I, have done cooler stuff than me, and it gives me an opportunity to figure out what their mistakes are. I, like you, read a ton. And I see some common threads about, like, I can tell pretty easily when I get a call into my office and I spend like 10 minutes on the phone with a business owner, I could pretty much size up what their business is like without even them telling me anything about it.
How?
Just because of the way that they talk and the types of things, you know, you can tell somebody who's like intellectually curious. I can tell by, there's a couple of things that are dead giveaways for me, whether or not they like their team. Like when you have an owner that's angry or bitter or just does not like their employees, or, you know, everyone always makes jokes like business would be great if it weren't for employees and customer. I get all of that sort of stuff. But like if there's some real disdain for their team, what sort of culture are they actually building, right? Where owners spend their time, you know, the older somebody gets as a business owner, you become more of an investor and less of an operator. But the ones that are continually learning, the ones that are like going to conferences, that are reading, that are, you know, getting involved in groups, you know, those are people that actually are humble enough. You know, humility, I always talk about the buzz, is a key thing, because none of us, myself and no other human on the planet that I've talked to, has done everything and has all the answers. And like, I think you have to be humble enough to say, like, I don't know most shit. Like, it's the business owners that get on the phone with me and the ones that are trying to prove everything. I always know that those are probably the guys that are actually really struggling. Their businesses are struggling. It's the humble ones. You know, like I think a great example of a humble individual in this space, who everyone that I'm going to say this word right now, I'm going to say this name and people aren't going to believe it. David Royce runs Aptiv. Business does $450, $500 million a year in revenue. I think there's a lot of dudes who think he's a total dick. He's actually a very humble guy, and he focuses on learning. And, he's got his own PR machine and all of that, but he actually is a very sincere and humble guy if you sit down and really talk to him. He doesn't have all the answers, and he's always been very curious. I don't know. I guess I'm rambling on and on and on, but
Yeah.
I think humility is as a business owner is very important. And I think we kind of lose, I've done this personally. I have lost track of taking recommendations from my team members because I feel like I know the answer. I try to teach that to the Mexican. The Mexican's always right in his own mind. Well, that's not a great way to run a business in general.
A lot of our default in the way that we react comes from our subconscious. Like 90% of what you're about to say is kind of already pre-written.
Yeah.
Understanding that about yourself, really understanding yourself, I think is something that most people, they need to try to unlock. Because if you just give in to your default all the time, you will not change. Like the outcomes won't change for you. So I've become very committed to understanding myself, my default nature, and allowing space for creating what I need to create that would be new in any moment. I come back to it and I fail all the time, and I come back to it all the time, daily, throughout daily interaction. And that has helped me. And I'd say something else that has helped me is this idea of not being enough. And I think a lot of entrepreneurs have that, but it's a strength, I see, because you're trying to always become better.
Yeah.
So going back to guitar, my dad's take on guitar was you'll never be good enough if you don't do X, right? And so there's always this, we're not enough, but I feel like that has an unrelenting drive behind it.
Yeah.
And also has the humble needing to learn flavor with it that comes with it. So you probably feel that as well. If you're continuing to push or be a driven person, there's always this, I'm not even there yet. There's so much more I can be doing. It's like that mentality.
And that's somewhat of a curse, right? It's like at the end of the day, everything is created by people who are willing to go out and experiment and be driven and be creative. But it's actually somewhat of a curse on that individual in and of himself, because like I feel like the more successful you are in certain endeavors, the more you create, almost like the less satisfied you get. You take a guy like Elon Musk, he's done amazing stuff. I would imagine he's very unsatisfied.
Is there anything wrong with that?
I don't know that there is.
I feel very much the same way.
Yeah.
Yeah, another thing is that we're always living in the future, a future that doesn't exist, that we're trying to create and bring into our moment right now, which is also kind of impossible, right? Like we want what we envision now.
Yeah.
And that's like always a frustration. But then once you allow enough time to have some of your vision come to life and actually be there and impact people, that's a great satisfaction comes from that. But you're already at the next point, right? And what we know and believe can be true and enable and impact all these individuals. So that's like the ongoing frustration I definitely feel. I have all these things I envisioned for GorillaDesk. You want them done today. Things are just not that fast. So I feel like, the entrepreneur visionary sits at the top for strategy, but also you have to be a little bit distant because the amount of frustration that will come in will creep into starting to want to go in and dismantle and kind of hurt what's happening.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's the whole thing, like almost the definition of the entrepreneur is having that vision of the future, but then thinking about how to organize all the resources into the today in order to get there. And that's not an easy path. One of the things that I suffer from the most is I tend to be extremely forward looking. And, and I've even had discussions with folks in my life over the time. They're like, hey, you need to be more present in today. Life is going on right now in the present. It's not going off in the future. So I find it difficult sometimes to balance those sorts of things. There's other people that only live for today. And I think for guys like me, that's important to have those people in my business. Like the Mexican, I'll give you an example. He only is concerned about what's happening right now, this very second. He's not thinking about the future. He's a good counterbalance to somebody like me who kind of lives off a little bit in the distance as I'm trying to organize resources to the future. So I would imagine that's almost, I'm not a EOS guy, but they have that whole EOS dichotomy, right? Like the visionary and the
integrator.
Integrator, yes.
Yeah. So, good question for you is, what have you done to maybe bring yourself into the present where in times where that might mean a lot to you and where you need to be present?
I have focused more effort on building a team with heavier on the things that I'm not good at, because I know that like I'm fighting against nature. And so sometimes I just kind of give up and say, but if I have the right people around me that will focus on those sorts of things, I can be okay with thinking about our plans for the future. It's hard to do, but that's what I've done. I've really focused on, because my business is not me. We've got a team, and so like I can synthetically create, or I can relieve myself of some of my innate problems if I actually surround myself with people that don't have those. So that's really what I've focused on. And, we did this Colby assessment, which I don't know much about those sorts of things. Jonathan Potoshnik, who what's his software? The lawn care software he ran, what was it called? Service Autopilot.
Yes.
He turned me on to the Colby assessment, which I thought was very valuable. The Mexican thought it was an utter total waste of time in our organization. Everyone else liked it. Do you know anything about that?
We focused on using Gallup's Strength Finders assessments as well, but it's kind of a similar assessment.
Yeah.
So how have you found that it works for you?
I think it was good. It was, I think, more impactful for the team than for me, because the team came back to me and said, oh, I didn't understand about the way she operates, but now I do, because she's very different from me. So I understand, so I think it was a helpful thing.
What really helps, Paul, with those assessments, kind of an unlock for me, is you have them take the assessment, but then after the fact, go in and highlight what they believe to be true. Because some of the things in the assessment, they may not believe to be true, or may not actually be completely true. So you have them self-assess the assessment by highlighting what they believe to be true. Okay. It really helps kind of unlock what they think they may believe may be true or untrue about their personality or the way they behave.
Interesting. Yeah, we haven't done a whole lot with it. I think it's interesting to kind of explore. We'll probably do it again, and it was really more of an experiment when we did it. Do you use that sort of stuff a lot or no?
Yeah, for every hire.
Yeah. Okay.
It also helps. So if you highlighted your assessment and share it with the team, they'll know more about you as well in the way that you work. Truly, because you've gone through and highlighted and validated, yes, I am this way. Yes, I prefer to be treated this way. Yes, I like my praise this way. You're having that validation. Sharing that with the team, then they get to understand. Understanding me, I'm a very complex person, so I share my own assessment, and people start to understand me a bit more. Yeah. I like it a lot. I like to use it.
When I shared mine, and we went through it with a guy who helped us interpret what the results meant. Like 90% of our organization was all very, very similar. What I learned with that is that all of our organization had like 90% almost this exact same results. So I was told we've got to balance that out a little bit, hire some different folks. But Chris, I appreciate you coming to see us this week. I really hope you and Rebecca have a great time down in Puerto Rico, your first time here. Hopefully you'll get to see some nice vistas. Yeah. And, you'll enjoy the boat tomorrow, I hope.
Yeah, I really appreciate you guys having us.
Absolutely.
And look forward to sharing more with your audience in the future.
That's fantastic. Look forward to it as well. Thanks, Chris.
Thanks, Paul.